AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
It's football season, and you can now get almost anything you need for game day delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a running back delivered, but you can get baby back ribs delivered. A strong defense? No. A strong deodorant? Yes. A six-pack of abs? Nope. Six-pack of beer? Yes. Get almost anything for game day delivered with Uber Eats, official on-demand food delivery partner of the NFL. Order now. Alcohol 21 plus and in select cities. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Año nuevo. Los mismos Extra Value Meals en McDonald's. Ahora te puedes llevar 2 snack wraps y papitas y una bebida mediana por solo $8. Solo por tiempo limitado. Precios y participación pueden variar. Los precios pueden ser más altos en Hawaii, Alaska y California y con entrega.
This episode is brought to you by Stouffer's. Here comes 3-time juggling champion Natalia Rogers. She's juggling law school, her TA job. Oh, narrowly catches the laundry. What's that fourth ball? Parents unexpectedly showed up at dinner time? Is that too much for Natalia? Not with Stouffer's Chicken Alfredo and its mouth-watering mix of Asiago, Romano, and Parmesan. When you're juggling 4 things at once and the clock strikes dinner, think Stouffer's.
Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, is now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+.
Trying to find some real in all the noise. You always do.
The artist you know, the story you don't. See Golden Globes nominee Jeremy Allen White as Bruce Springsteen. Critics are saying it's a career-defining performance.
Let's burn this place down, Johnny.
Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere, now streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney+. Rated PG-13.
Hey, thanks for listening. This is Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of Reversing Climate Change, the podcast you are listening to right at this very moment. Before we get into the bulk of today's show, I'd love to tell you about our sponsor, Philip Lee LLP. I really like doing shows about the law. I think the law is such a fascinating part of our shared social life. It structures so much of it. It's badly understood by most people. And just structuring deals within carbon removal is hard. I'm talking grown-up deals here. Like when you're trying to put together an enormous package, complicated structuring, a lot of money changing hands, the stakes are high. You really do need a good lawyer. I'm sorry to tell you that if you are a startup out there in carbon removal, you're going to probably pay a fair amount of money to lawyers. There's just no way around it. Your choice is basically, do you get a bad lawyer or a good lawyer? One really cool thing I can say on Philip Lee LLP's behalf, well, one, Ryan Covington and I did a very fun show about how basically no one except for an elite few really know what bankability and project finance even mean. And he lays it out very clearly. If you'd like to go listen to that show, it's awesome and it's linked in the show notes. And also we ended up talking about Ernest Hemingway of Paramount too. So it keeps with the tradition of reversing climate change. One also really cool thing is that they just won Environmental Finance's VCM Law Firm of the Year. They've won it 3 years in a row, 2023, 2024, and 2025. It's the only award for legal teams operating in the VCM, and they have offices in the US, Europe, and the UK. You should check out Philip Lee LLP. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this, and thank you to our sponsors. You really make this so that it's something that in a busy life with lots of competing priorities, I'm able to keep coming back and making more reversing climate change. Thanks so much for what you do. And now, here is the show. Hello, thank you so much for listening to the Reversing Climate Change podcast. My name is Ross Kenyon. I'm the host of the show, and I am a carbon removal entrepreneur. I recently took a continuing education course through the University of Pennsylvania that carbon removal legends and alumni of the show, Jen Wilcox and Noah Deich, put on, and it was a really wonderful experience. I've seen it called both the CDR Executive Education Program. I've seen it referred to as purchasing carbon removal credits. It was 7 weeks long. It had quite a roster of serious people in carbon removal sharing more about how they do their work and offered some very helpful training in life cycle assessment and techno-economic assessment. you've probably heard me say this, but the thing I love about carbon removal is how difficult it is. Been working in this space for 8 years and has a quality to it of, well, how do you know when it's time to paint the Golden Gate Bridge? Because you just finished painting it. That's how. And carbon removal has that tendency too, where one is constantly having to learn about science and policy and the tricky business of commercializing deep tech, scientifically oriented companies. It never ends. And this course was a great experience to go back to basics and also learn more about what it's like to be on the other side of the table. I've been trying to cross-train and do a bunch of different experiences lately, which is something that I recommend almost universally to people. I've mostly worked on the business operator side, and it's been great fun getting to do more work on the investing side, doing a venture fellowship right now. And this course basically trains you to be an effective carbon removal purchaser. Normally I would be sitting on the other side of the table, and this time it was me with all the power, being able to study these lowly project developers who I'm trying to figure out where the holes are in their business. Is this someone that I think my company should be buying credits from over the long term? I say that in kind of a silly way, but that is what one was supposed to do. And so, and the course is centered around a few homework assignments and a final presentation that you do in a group, and then working up the LCA and TEA numbers necessary to understand what this company is doing now, what it's likely to do in the future, and whether or not this is a company that the theoretical purchaser that you are advising, whether or not they should actually buy credits from this company, and if so, under which terms, and how should they be negotiated. If you're listening to this show, I suspect that sounds like great fun. And it was, but it was also really hard. These are not always the functions that I'm brought in to work with companies on. So I really appreciated getting to learn some new skills. I learned a lot, had great fun, and developed an even stronger respect for my peers who do this kind of work on a regular basis. They really do make the world go round. The company that I chose to diligence is called Graphyte. Graphyte's doing really cool work, taking waste biomass in the United States, drying it and packing it into bricks in a process that they call carbon casting, and then enveloping them in a polymer that keeps them from decaying. And they are then buried underground. Although maybe you can see from the thumbnail of the show that they also don't need to be buried underground. They can also be above ground, either as a ziggurat. And then as I was thinking about this, I had just showed my kid A New Hope for the first time. So I was also thinking about, could we not have carbon cast bricks on Yavin 4? So that also is something to consider. And so I've been in touch with Graphyte for a while, but wanting to do a show. I think what they're doing is so interesting. I appreciated the chance to study what they're doing in great detail. And they were kind enough to agree to read my homework about them and then offer to correct it live on the air. So that's what we're doing today. If you want to hear my research on Graphyte, get poked at, corrected, they're very generous with their time and very kind to me in doing this. And I don't think I've ever done a show quite like this. So I hope you enjoy it. It's great. Hannah Murnen is on. Hannah is Graphyte's Chief Technology Officer, and Barclay Rogers, who is the co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Graphyte. There are a couple things that get referenced in here that I'll put links to. So like you'll hear me say PDD, a project design document. If that's a new concept to you, open up the show notes and I'll put a link to their work. Carbon removal projects have quite a lot of information that they are required to post online. The registry has a lot of information that's super interesting that you can dive into to your nerdy heart's content, should you wish to do so. All right, that's enough information. While you're still here, before the show has started, if you wouldn't mind opening up your podcast app and giving the show 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or both. If you can write a quick review on Apple Podcasts, that's also very, very helpful. I cannot overstate how helpful that is. There's also an option for $5 a month to become a paid subscriber of the show. That will give you access to bonus content, and it will take out all of the ads that I do not read myself. In any case, Hannah and Barclay are here. I'm going to cut to the show now. Thanks for listening. Barclay and Hannah, thank you for joining me.
Thanks so much for having us, Ross.
This is a show unlike any that I've done before. because I was in Jen Wilcox and Noah Deich's UPenn course on purchasing carbon dioxide removal. I chose Graphyte out of a list of project developers to do an unexpectedly large amount of homework. If you're listening and you want to do the class, it's amazing. More work than expected. I think I had to go look up PDDs on registries and read them. Are you sure you want to do that? If so, then the class is really great. And even still, with all the work put into it, I'm not even sure that I halfway did a good job for Graphyte. I feel like my numbers may not even make sense. And so I have the recipients of my analysis here to correct my homework for me. I'm a little scared. I don't know if you can hear the tone of my voice. My smile turned upwards. I'm blushing a little bit. Whew. So anyways, Barclay and Hannah, I don't even know where to begin.
You'll be relieved to know that you did quite a good job. So we're going to look at some actual numbers relative to your estimates. It'll be a fun thing to kind of do live.
Yes, indeed. I did this now a few months ago. But one of the things that I noticed that's still most salient to me is the rate of credit issuance and delivery was less than I had expected. I think the nameplate capacity of the Pine Bluff location was greater, and it's slower to issue than maybe I had hoped. And I was wondering if that signals some kind of risk for the company. Is that actually a true thing that I observed, or not really?
Yeah, let's start there, because I think on the whole, your numbers were pretty close to right, except for that one. And I think some of that just has a bit to do with some communication. So the capacity of the project in Arkansas, kind of nameplate capacity, is about 14,000 tons carbon dioxide equivalents per year. Okay, so as opposed to 50, the existing line has a nameplate capacity of about 14,000 tons. We removed about 10,000 tons in total in 2025. So that puts it at basically a 71% operating efficiency in year one. So that's good for a, early process to be at operating efficiency of about 71%.
Was that 50,000 nameplate capacity? I've pulled that directly from a document. I think it might have been the original PDD on isometric. Was that just outdated, or did things change, or did I read something wrong? Like, what actually happened there?
I think the PDD is just outdated. Hannah, you might be able to speak to that a little more specifically.
Yeah, I mean, when we did the PDD, we were sort of at the early stages of building the loblolly plant, and we're sizing it and setting everything out. And we ended up building the pilot line very quickly with the capacity that Barclay listed. So the PDD, I think, still lists the, eventual planned capacity of that facility, which we are undergoing an expansion right now to increase the nameplate capacity of that facility. So I think you are right that is the number that is in that PDD. You're not reading anything wrong. But I think in actuality, that expansion is now underway now for getting to that capacity.
Okay, that's good to know, because I had this this EEnews.net article that I found. It was an article that quotes Bill Gates and you, Barclay, talking about it's a $10 million facility, which I don't even know if that's still correct. Is that? The quote is, it's in the $10 million range of capital expenditures. So I'm also just trying to back myself into a CapEx estimate for how this works. And then also understand across all the credits that you're likely to sell at the rate that I'm seeing you issue, how much would you actually have to sell in order to become profitable and to keep receiving? Yeah. And I think I got stumped on that one too. I'm not even sure I calculated that right. I tried my best at it, but I think I'm amazed at how much you have to infer to even do halfway decent numbers in this game.
Yeah.
Maybe let's
kind of jump in a little bit, Ross. Yeah. So let's talk about, let me try to sort of frame it just at the start. And I think the best, most useful conversation will be to talk about the loblolly. This is our project in Arkansas at the expanded level. Okay. At the roughly, 50,000 ton per year capacity. To be very precise, it's 45,000 tons per year will be the capacity of the loblolly facility. That is with post-expansion. That is effectively the module size for Graphyte's processing lines. Okay, so just imagine that just think of any, kind of modular process where you can build one line and an adjacent line and an adjacent line and adjacent line. So our carbon casting facilities are designed to do that, to have one line and then an adjacent line and adjacent line so we can scale as the market grows. Okay. To get the numbers just, as sort of dialed as we can, the CapEx for a 50,000 ton per year processing facility that include the associated storage site development is about $10 million, between $10 and $15 million upfront capital investment. That, $5 million, flex really has to do with just site specific conditions. Do you have to build a building? Is there a certain sort of, particulars around a certain site that, makes it cost more money? So the low end's about 10 million, the high end will be about, 15 million. But I think the number that's really important there is, let's just do some quick math, right? So just make it, let's call it 15 million just to be conservative, right? So take that $15 million, divide that by the, capacity of that line, 50,000 tons per year, right? And then divide that by the amortization period for that capital. And you
What is that, by the way? How long is the lifespan of this capital? I got stuck on that part
about
too.
20 years.
20 years, okay.
It's about 20 years. Yeah. And so that roughly, if I'm doing my math right here on the fly, it's to about $15 a ton CO2 in levelized cost.
Oh, man. Wow. I think I ended up at least an order of magnitude above that. I wonder which step there was a goof in.
Yeah, I think you came in at $44 a ton.
Still an order of magnitude.
In your kind of CapEx number or your levelized cost. How you got there, I'm not quite sure, but if you weren't like totally off and get to the final numbers, you missed that one, but you kind of undershot on some others. So you weren't off, that drastically in the end.
I don't know, but 15 versus 44, you're already so far below what other people are charging at that point. You're in methane abatement territory or something like that, which is, it's not carbon dioxide removal. That puts you almost in a position of being unpopular among your industry peers. I wonder how.
Well, that's one of the things, and it'll get to some of the founding philosophy of like why graphite came up with the carbon casting process and so forth. And, one of them is just, we need to do the lowest cost thing first, right? It's just a way to make progress, to, get going with carbon dioxide removal and, having a relatively low CapEx, both in aggregate number, right? A $15 million versus a $250 million or a $500 million upfront investment means you can actually do it, right? That's why we have an existing, project, right? Compared to others that just exist on paper today. So, it's not I think we need many different forms of carbon dioxide removal, but one of the kind of unique value propositions that we have is the ability to be able to build them at relatively low upfront capital cost.
Adobe Acrobat Studio, so brand new. Show me all the things PDFs can do. Do your work with ease and speed. PDF Spaces is all you need. Do hours of research in an instant with key insights from an AI assistant. Pick a template with a click. Now your prezzo looks super slick. Close that deal? Yeah, you won. Do that, doing that, did that, done. Now you can do that with Acrobat. Now you can do that with the all-new Acrobat. It's time to do your best work with the all-new Adobe Acrobat Studio.
They always tell you there's a catch, a compromise, an asterisk. Terms apply. See store for details. Maybe less than advertised. May vary by mood. Probably. Sprite Zero Sugar? It's different. It's the lemon lime flavored refreshment you want with zero sugar. So, no fast voice? No caveats. Just refreshment. This is Sprite Zero Sugar. Obey your thirst.
Anything to add, Hannah?
No, I think the capital cost is obviously only one part of the eventual unit cost. And so I think, as Barclay said, keeping your capital costs low is important for getting the projects built and being able to finance the projects. The other part of it is how do we keep our operating costs low? And there, I think we're relying on the low energy associated with using biomass as a feedstock for a carbon removal process. So, we're relying on photosynthesis to do the capture part, which is contributing to very low energy use. We also have very high carbon efficiency, meaning of the carbon in the biomass. 90% of it ends up as a durable ton removed. And so that's the other piece, I think, if you're thinking about how do you get the most out of a limited set of resources, which is obviously how you drive down cost. It all comes down to like, okay, how much of the carbon actually ends up removed and how much energy and other, cost, labor, et cetera, does it take us to get it there? So I think CapEx is part of it. OpEx is obviously the other part of the equation, which we can do math around, but at the heart of it, it comes down to how are you the most efficient you can be.
But carbon efficiency also just helps with the net removals equation here. It's also a flashpoint issue in carbon removal, because I think if you say carbon efficiency around biochar people, the blood pressure goes up a little bit. I think there's a tendency to think that, okay, graphite is pulling carbon out of the fast carbon cycle, it's burying it underground, it's not helping anything grow. It's just separate from the fast carbon cycle, whereas biochar is potentially remediating in various categories of fertility or helping with excess runoff. That carbon is not being used in some way that could be valuable in a non-carbon removal, net removals world. But graphite has gone so far down, how do we maximize for net removals? And Frontier agrees with you too. Like that's why Frontier at this point does not support biochar. It's not an issue of durability, it's an issue of carbon efficiency. Are we only trying to make carbon removal work? Is that the main part of the equation? Or should we not be trying to, have a foot in each camp here and try to make sure that the benefits of lower carbon efficiency, but maybe better ecosystem services are a part of the portfolio too?
Yeah, it's a huge question in the overall market. Okay. And, I kind of state it quite simply is like, well, what problem are we trying to solve? Right? Are we trying to solve climate change? Are we trying to solve something else? Right. And so, if we're trying to solve climate change, I think there's a very defensible argument to say, like, the thing we should focus on is carbon efficiency, right? Is like, we've got a resource, that resource, let's just take of 1 ton carbon dioxide equivalent of biomass. What can we do, that is the most efficient to ensure that ton carbon dioxide equivalent in that biomass does not go back into the atmosphere, because, the primary objective here is to, lower atmospheric concentrations, of CO2. Now, that said, there is certainly room for discussion around community benefits and other engagements. I think one of the things, that I would say about graphite is that's often overlooked is, yes, we are very much focused on carbon efficiency and removing CO2, from the atmosphere as efficiently, less energy, quickly as possible. But we also believe in community benefits. We believe in working, with the community. And so, our primary ecosystem benefit, community benefit, if you will, is to take, abandoned lands. These are former surface mines, think of things like rock quarries, gravel pits, limestone quarries, things along that. Returning those lands to the original land contours, right? Kind of not leaving holes in the ground, if you will, but sort of bringing the land back up to surface and turning them into parks or wildlife habitat, whatever is suitable to the community. And so, yes, we're laser focused on carbon efficiency, but we also have a co-benefit, and that co-benefit is primarily around sort of parks and wildlife and, making use or rehabilitating abandoned lands.
So interesting, because I thought I had seen that one of the ways to keep OpEx low and to help the carbon efficiency stay high is to co-locate with the waste producers of the biomass here. And is that in the same place as where you want to create parks for families to be running around in soccer games? Is that in the same spot?
Yeah, it's a super good question. And so, there's trade-offs like everything, right? And so, on the one hand, yes, you want to be as close as you possibly can to the biomass sources, because the biomass sources, moving biomass around is one of your cost drivers. But you also want to create community, benefits as well. And, one of the things that I'm very interested in, very proud of about Graphyte is we work in the rural economy, right? And so, biomass is at places like timber mills, right? Sawmills. It's at places like rice mills, at places where people work. And these are also places, so consequently, they're places where people reside nearby, right? And these are also places where there's lots of surface mining. There's surface mining all over the place. Okay. We're digging holes for, cement and gravel and so on in many, many, rural locations. And so the ability to do in all of the above, to be relatively close to your biomass, and to take these abandoned lands and turn them into assets. It's literally like not necessarily a next door activity, but it's within miles, and you can create, these very, positive public benefits.
I think a couple of things to add to that, like as we already touched on, the low CapEx and sort of reasonable facility size for us. I mean, it's not like we're trying to build a BECS facility that's going to take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tons of biomass per year. We're talking about a 50,000 ton per year plant. And so that lets us site these sort of at these spots that Barclay's talking about that sit at the nexus of these multiple industries and activities. I think it's also worth mentioning this is going to look different in different parts of the country and parts of the world. So in Arkansas, it's just as Barclay described it. There's sawmills, there's rice mills, there's people living there, there's farmers, there's sort of all these pieces. For example, we're developing a project in Arizona where that looks different. Now we're talking about biomass that's coming from wildfire forest treatments, where you're thinning the forest to reduce the likelihood or impact from fires. And now, instead of having a park, we're talking about, where people are going to be running around, as you described it. We're talking about that land that is previously like a cement aggregate mine becoming a bat conservation piece of land. So now we're talking about working on a place where different species of bats can thrive and grow. And so I think it's going to look different place to place based on what that community in that area, what makes sense for that community. But the ethos of how do we take a piece of land that has been, has been taken out of usable service, how do we put it back into usable service, whatever usable service looks like, I think is something that is something we probably don't talk about enough about what we're doing, but it's kind of similar to the way biochar thinks about. Part of it is rehabilitating soil and creating more fertile land. This is a different sort of viewpoint of how you might think about going about that.
And just to stick on this point for just one more minute, one of the things I really like about that, what Hennes was saying about the flexibility of the, use, is it allows a real community engagement. You get to sit down in the community and say, what would you like this to be? Not like, I have my widget, I'm going to want you to want my widget, right? It is like, we could turn this to many different things. It could be a park, it could be wildlife habitat, it could be a dirt track for, quad bikes, if that's what you're into, right? There's many things that it could be, but it allows for real and legitimate community engagement. What would you like for it to be? And let's make it that.
What about a big ziggurat that you could make out of the bricks? Are you open to a ziggurat configuration?
Hannah?
We are open to anything.
Okay.
Comes down to the specific. It's all in the details.
I really like this modular approach here. It sounds like what you're saying is that the smallest economically feasible unit size here is 15,000 tons a year. And then you just, in parallel industrial processes, you can multiply those out depending on the throughput of a given site location. Is that correct, by the way?
Yeah, that's basically correct. So, the pilot line was kind of built subscale, right? So I think the way to think about, kind of our desired unit size is 50, so 50,000 ton CO2 equivalents. And there's a few things per year, okay? And there's a few real benefits to that. Is one, if you think about all of the things that we have seen kind of project finance work for, cost reductions, it is all about modularity, right? It's like get a unit, dial that unit down, and then drop as many of those units in. It's hard to do that, with much larger one-off plants, right? So, if your unit size is $250 million, you just can't build that many of those, right? If it's, $10 or $15 million, you can build a unit, you can build adjacent unit, and so on and so forth. So, there's two real benefits. One is it allows you kind of incrementally grow, right? So it's the binary, do I build it, do I not build it, is a lesser sort of hurdle to overcome because smaller capacity, smaller CapEx. And then secondly, is it allows you, just think about it from a project financier's perspective. If you're like, hey, I just built that one line, I'm going to build an adjacent line right beside it that looks identical. Are you okay with it? Yep. Right. And so it takes a real risk out of the project finance discussion.
Oh, without a doubt. I know that's very much a part of the private equity playbook too, is repeatability. And if you want serious financiers interested in what you're doing the same thing over and over and getting better at it is much better than scaling up an order of magnitude in CapEx and making a facility where economies of scale are capital dependent rather than just, it's all in parallel. We can scale it to the site. It reminds me of, the company it reminds me of most, I think this might be unexpected, maybe no one has told you this before, is Nintendo. Has anyone told you that?
I haven't heard a comparison to Nintendo. Please go on.
No.
Well, Nintendo's commercial strategy was that they would use last generation's technology for video games and just make like really good use out of it. Everyone else was rushing to have the newest chips and everything else. And Nintendo didn't try to compete on that. You're using pretty simple technology. It's like probably one of the least flashy of any of the things happening in carbon removal, but it gets some really great numbers and the performance that people want in the places where it counts, at least to audiences who don't care about the carbon efficiency stuff, or they agree with you on your take on it. But I think that's a really useful thing to do. I wish more people focus on the being excellent at project development rather than rushing into tech development, which is expensive, requires a lot of capital, leads to a lot of dead ends. You're nodding. I imagine you probably like this comparison.
Yeah. I mean, 100%. And I think there's just, there's a couple of ways of looking at this. And, the way that I tend to look at carbon removal is the same way I look at lots of commodity markets. And that is, it is constructed of a supply curve, right? And the thing you want to do is you want to develop the supply curve according to the cost function, right? And so you do the most of the lowest cost thing until you've exhausted that. And then you move on to the next highest cost, the next highest cost, the next highest cost, right? And, that sort of lowest cost there's a lot of things to that, right? It's not just, the actual cost, but it's the energy uses, it's the feasibility. It's like, the way that you kind of scale. And so, I like the Nintendo comparison. I like, just this core idea of in this industry, the most logical thing is to do the first thing first and the second thing second and so on. And so, I realize that's not necessarily how the industry is developing right now, but I think, in retrospect, I think that may well prove to be somewhat of a prescient view that we need to approach this just like any other commodity market. And that is start on the low end or the far left end of the supply curves.
Yeah, I think that is true. And I also like this Nintendo comparison. I think the other piece that's important to think about and we focus a lot on is actually delivering the tons now. And so you think about, okay, as Barclay said, I think we did 10,280 tons or something in 2025. The climate value of those tons delivered in 2025 versus 2030 is real. Like being able to take carbon out of the atmosphere now as compared to 5, 10, 15 years from now is really something. And so I think thinking about it as an industry, how do we support solutions that can deliver now, which is a lot of the biomass labs, because those are a lot of the ones that are able to hit cost relevant targets and to actually have technology that's simple enough to be able to deliver now. I think that's, quite important for the industry to think about. I think we are very focused on how do we deliver what we said we were going to deliver, and we're sitting at 100% on-time delivery to all of our customers. And I don't think there are that many CDR companies that can say that, because there is a lot of tech development going on, which is important and needs to happen, but also we need to be delivering today.
I think one of the potential downsides here that I noticed that plays against this, so focus so much on delivery, it's low tech, there's biomass availability for now, and we'll see how it plays out in the future, and we should get there. But I'm also worried that it's very dependent upon either policy support or continued voluntary carbon market activity. Even in the last couple of weeks, the world feels like it's changing a lot. Climate multilateralism is increasingly imperiled. I'm wondering to what degree climate action will continue. Some of the companies that I work with have co-products that can be valuable. They have lower carbon efficiency, but they're doing stuff with the carbon in a way that the carbon removal does not have to be the whole of the story. How are you reacting to how the world may be changing? Is this impacting how you're thinking about commercial strategy, or maybe not as much?
Yeah, it's a super good point. Okay. And I think if we are just realistic with ourselves, right, and we look at the, carbon removal industry, right, is it started in a very different policy, environment than we are in currently, right? And I think, my view is really twofold. Is like climate change has not gone away. Okay. It was important 5 years ago. It will be important again. Okay. And then the question really is, does the company survive, during that sort of interlude, right? And so, it is, in one way you can survive is having another product that you can sell in the interim period, right? The other, way you can survive is just, ensuring that you're being very responsible with, the venture dollars that you have, like, and managing your costs and so on. But I think that is the reality, right? Is that we are in a different policy environment than we were. And, but all of that said, I think, I really focus on the fundamentals, right? I focus on, it goes back to the carbon efficiency point, but it's like climate change is an important consideration. That will resurface, right? And, at that point, we're going to be back at the fundamentals question again. And I think, we may have seen some, revision in thinking over time, with respect to, what technologies we focus on, how important do we stress delivery and cost and so on. But, we don't get particularly distracted by, the blowings of the policy winds.
Do you neither, Hannah?
New CBS Sunday.
The Grammys, baby!
History will be made. Live, unfiltered, unexpected. Woo! Bigger than ever.
I was a ghost.
Bigger stars, bigger performances. Music's biggest night is getting bigger.
Now you see what all the hype is about.
Trevor Noah hosts the Grammy Awards live.
Anything is possible.
CBS Sunday and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
No, I agree. I think there will probably be, if we look fast forward 5 years from now for the industry, I think we will likely be in a different policy scenario. Who knows what it will look like. But I think the key is to have survived through that time period and be in a place where we're ready to continue delivering and continue scaling. And so, yeah, whether you do that by having multiple products or you do that by figuring out other strategies, I think focusing on the things we can control and, control the controllable, and that's all you can do.
What I like about Graphyte is, I don't know whose influence this is. Barclay, this probably has your fingerprints all over it, but it's very linear. It's like, what the goal is. There's no fancy footwork. It's kind of just like as it's presented. It's pretty rare in our space, but it is a way to keep costs down. It makes your story very simple to tell. The trade-offs you can acknowledge and be like, yeah, it is that, but we think it's worth it in this way. That's a pretty quick way to tell a story that is comprehensible. And it seems like it is working. Can simplicity actually be a good selling point that people are overlooking in CDR?
I think so. I mean, I think...
yeah, you go ahead, Anna.
No, I was just going to say, I think the buyers are smart. I think at the end of the day, they also want the fundamentals. They also want... It's still a voluntary market. They're still doing it because it's important to the company as far as the mission that they've set themselves for their targets. And so I think coming back to the fundamentals of we're doing this because it is the most effective, most, cost, most energy, most resource efficient way to hit our targets and to hit our goals and to get done what we want to get done. I think that resonates with buyers. And I think it will continue to do so more and more, particularly as there's less, policy and noise around it. It becomes much more about the fundamentals and being able to deliver what you said you're going to deliver.
You're both very experienced business people. I imagine you're used to looking at things like cash flow statements, and you're trying to have a business that is just sound outside of we burn BC money for years, and then we ask for some more when we have a little bit of traction, and then we do the same thing at different scales. And it seems like this linearity also is just fundamental business soundness. It seems like it is maybe present in a way that is not always super common either. This is a kind of flattering question, but I think it is also the truth, maybe.
Yeah, it is really the truth. And I think, just to kind of link it to the carbon goals, right, that we had, right, is, one of the things that I just believe so strongly is, the way that this entire industry gets to any kind of meaningful impact, right, is it gets out of the VC, world because you can't build manufacturing facilities. And it gets into with VC dollars and it gets into the project capital world, right? I think that is a pretty widely accepted perspective. The way that you get there, right, is you de-risk your tech, right? No project financer wants to take a gamble on, does my catalyst work, right? Does this project go from a lab bench to to an industrial facility, and I've got to spend $500 million to try to figure that out, right? And so, that simplicity, that sort of, deployability is what I might call it, right? Really does enable project capital more quickly. That is essential to this entire industry getting off the ground. So our kind of love affair with Whizbang may be a little bit of a impediment to the industry actually getting to scale through project capital.
Are you able to raise debt?
Yes.
Simple question, simple answer. Are you able to report It's not that common. Yes, it's not that common of a thing to do, even with blue chip counterparties and offtakes. It can still be difficult. Any advice or any learnings you've had from this process you can share?
I think a few things, and it's like to state like the very basics, right? Is you need to make money if you're going to be able to raise debt or project capital for that reason, right? So debt providers and project, equity investors are not interested in investing in underwater, projects, right? So gross profit margins are essential, right? Which means, your price has to be greater than your cost, right? And so, it's just like such fundamentals, but that's just how we're building this business, right? It is very, kind of straightforward in many ways, right? We just start with the fundamentals, be it carbon efficiency, be it at gross margins, right? And you just build upon those because we're trying to build, a real, business that will take carbon out of the atmosphere and do so for a very long time.
I think maybe one to add on the technical side of things, as Barclay said earlier, project financiers, debt, otherwise, project capital, otherwise, whatever form, don't want to take technical risk. And so thinking very early on about how do you both actually de-risk the technology, prove it out, but also get third-party sort of validations of that. So, for us, we very early on did a third-party engineers report about our facility and our technology. And so like trying to get more and more people reviewing what you're doing and to say, yes, like it's going to work. It does work. Here's the evidence. Like be an open book, because the sooner you figure out something that's not going to work, the sooner you can fix it and move on. But I think very early on, trying to show how you're going to de-risk the technology and then actually getting those third-party validation is really, really important to the financing side of things.
Fascinating. Is the implication here that Graphyte is a profitable company now? Is that okay? Is that something that you can even say?
At the project level, in 2026, yes, we will generate a gross margin at the project. Okay, that does not mean, just to be super clear, that we're generating enough of a gross margin that we're covering up my Hannah salary, if you will, right? But it is, very in the very near future that the Graphyte as a whole will be a profitable company enterprise.
Did you structure it in a way where the top co is distinct from the Loblolly project?
Yeah, we did. And the primary reason for that is it's just project, capital, right? So what you want to do is you want to keep your projects isolated. That allows investors to participate in those projects without having to invest in the top co, just as an example. So, we literally from day one, we set up the company like that with essentially you've got the top co and all of the projects in development are all individual, project companies essentially sitting under the top co.
I don't think a lot of people are coming into this space doing that. I know many people are doing different structures, and like CO2 ED comes to mind, someone who's doing a lot with joint ventures. But I think a lot of people are thinking that the equity that is raised, that goes to fund the projects, and these are all part of the same economic unit. And you're saying, don't do it that way.
I mean, that is our view. I mean, it'll go back to that, kind of overall view with respect to the industry as a whole, and certainly with respect to Graphyte, is in order to get, to scale, you need to cut in, and to get down the cost curve, you need to come down the cost of capital curve, right? And to do that, you need to move through different forms of capital, project capital ultimately sort of into infrastructure style capital. A pretty common way of doing that is just as I described, and that is you create individual project companies that house the projects that allows, project level investors to invest there and not having to go into the, into the top co. So, there are many ways to do that. That is a pretty standard way that I just described. That's how we set Graphyte up.
Would you entertain an offer to be acquired by private equity?
It's, maybe. I think what I would say, is my passion here is making a meaningful impact on the climate. Okay. And the way that you do that, and it's kind of a little bit of a nerdy way of saying it, but is your cost of capital is really important. Okay. And so if a private equity investor has got a cost of capital that allows me to build a whole lot more projects and making an impact on the climate, of course I'll entertain, an acquisition associated with that. It's really just about that. It's about what are we trying to do? The case of Graphyte, which is very meaningfully focused on, making a climate impact and removing CO2 from the atmosphere as quickly as we can. And we think that, cost of capital is a very important part of it.
One thing I noticed in reviewing Graphyte's materials is that the carbon cast blocks are wrapped in a kind of plastic. And I'm told much work has gone into the exact composition of this plastic. I imagine the real and perceived risks of burying this, given all the concerns around toxicity, are in your head. You've designed around this.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that one?
I can take this one.
Okay.
So I'm a chemical engineer at heart, did polymer studies for my PhD. Definitely have put a lot of thought and effort and work into thinking about the encapsulation material. And so I think a few things, like number one, the goal of the encapsulation material is to be very long lasting and durable. Like we're talking about thousands of years. So obviously we're trying to design a material that's not degrading and not, putting any sort of material into the soil or anywhere where we're burying it. And so we have explicitly chosen materials that are very long lasting and durable, and that, lots of scientific research has gone into polymer degradation and polymer breakdown over time, depending on the type of polymer and the, type of conditions. And we have chosen materials that are known to be very, non-degradable, particularly in the storage conditions in which they're being used. So I think that's point one. It's like the whole point is to design a material that's long lasting. The other point is that the material is also designed to be incredibly impermeable. And so, we were just talking, actually, just before I got on the slide, I was talking to somebody who has a waste stream, that they're worried about the things in their waste stream. It's a, biodegradable waste stream. They have stuff in it that they're worried about if they just store it, put it in a landfill or put it on the ground, it's going to leach out contaminants. And they're saying, could you use it in your process, encapsulate it, and contain some of that waste? And the answer is yes. Like our materials are very, very impermeable. They're not going to let things in through the encapsulation film. I think the other piece is we're doing testing to demonstrate and validate that we're not putting any contaminants into the soil or into the water. So we're permitted by the state of Arkansas. We test the groundwater, the water on our facility, the runoff water, and we've done soil testing. So we have a lot of evidence that there's no degradation happening of the polymer film in our process.
And is the material itself, I imagine you're avoiding the types of plastic or plastic byproducts that have to be labeled at this point, or, my friends who work as geologists or remediation experts are cleaning out of military bases and stuff like that.
Yes, there's no PFAS. There's none of these forever chemical pieces in these types of materials.
Yeah. And Ross, just to jump in for a second, let's go back to your homework assignment for a moment, right? So you underestimated the CapEx, but you didn't fully capture the cost of our storage site engineering, right? And the cost of the, materials, the encapsulation materials that we're using, right? And so, I'll kind of get you the whole numbers. You came in at a total of $154 a ton. Our levelized cost right now is in the order of $130, ish dollars a ton. So you weren't off, by, radical, numbers, but where you did miss was there, right? And I think that's an important, right? Because we're putting, a lot of investment in, the quality of those materials, but also in the engineering of the storage site to ensure that there is no, material escaping from that site, period.
Interesting. And how has it been communicating this in these towns? I imagine even if the reality is that there is very little risk or potentially even no risk in some cases, that perception can still wag the dog a bit. Does that happen ever? Are you seeing things like that? How are you able to manage social perception?
Yeah, I'll tell a little story here. So we were kind of in the project development process for a particular location, and the local kind of community leaders, like the local kind of county government leaders, started getting questions and, about it from, various members of the community. And so, we went to the county commissioners and said, well, look, we've got a process, we've got an operating facility. You want to come look at it? And so they took a field trip and came and visited the project in Arkansas, and particularly went to the sequestration site. Well, went to both facilities, but this particular comment happened at the sequestration site. We're all standing on the edge of it, watching it. And they're like, this process is completely fine. We'd be very happy for you to build this in our backyard. It's hot outside. Let's get back in the car. Right. And so, the point was very opposite of, other sort of, kind of community concerns where people look at it. It seems very scary. It seems dangerous somehow. Here, people look at it and say, I'll just use the exact words. They're like, this is just reverse mining. We've been mining in our community for a very long time. We're very happy to run the process in reverse. Let's go.
Sure, they're sometimes like, people are willing to pay you to just dig a hole and put stuff in it. Okay.
Yes.
The simplicity story cuts back the other direction sometimes too, maybe.
Yeah.
What else from the homework is worth talking about here? I have it up to...
Let's talk a little bit about the LCA as well, because I found that one kind of fun. As well. And like I said, I did do some homework on your homework. And so as a general principle, I actually took your homework and compared it to the LCA we did on a particular submission in the middle of 2025. And I'm pleased to report the gross number, you came up with, quote, a 10% deduction, a 90% efficient process. When I looked at our actual LCA, it was an 89% efficient process, so an 11% deduction. So you got that one right. Now, just to be crystal clear, that is before any of the buffer pool deductions, okay? But you got that number right. But I think that, life cycle assessment, that LCA efficiency is really important, right? And I think particularly, in the case of energy use, right? And we kind of look across, the developments, if you think about the start of the durable CDR industry and where we are today, we've seen a radical increase in electricity demand, and particularly demand for renewable power with the rise of data centers and other, uses of electricity, nearshoring and so on. And so, I think having a process that doesn't consume much electricity means that we have a very efficient LCA. It also means we're not in competition over green electrons, right? Our process actually is running on grid electricity today. And the reason is the amount of electricity is just not that great.
The world moves fast. Your workday, even faster. Pitching products, drafting reports, analyzing data. Microsoft 365 Copilot is your AI assistant for work. Built into Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and other Microsoft 365 apps you use. Helping you quickly write, analyze, create, and summarize. So you can cut through clutter and clear a path to your best work. Learn more at Microsoft.com/M365 Copilot.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
That's nice because your grid is natural gas, right?
Yeah. The Arkansas grid is not terrible. It does have some hydro in it. So the, factor for the Arkansas grid is not the worst. But yeah, it's mostly natural gas. And we are just running on grid electricity.
Was there any plan to do behind the gate power?
We've looked at it. As Barclay said, it doesn't have a huge impact because of small. It's a small amount. Isometric is also looking at sort of what are the requirements for behind the gate, meaning, time matching and things like that. So it's not quite as simple as just buying, a credit, a rec that you can apply. It's sort of like, are you actually enabling, development of new power and things like that? So at this point, it's something we will likely do at some point, but it's sort of not the highest yield for our efforts at this point.
How do you even calculate it at this point too, with the long wait list for natural gas turbines? Like, if you might be waiting a while, then displacing that power from somewhere else, if you even wanted to do that way with carbon capture, would that even count?
Yeah.
Healthy egg questions where my brain just melts staring at them, where it's like, how is it possible to do anything at all? Maybe I'll just take a nap.
I think that's why Isometric is putting a lot of thought into what will they allow as far as behind the gate when they're thinking about LCAs for carbon removal projects, because it's not clear what impact, if you're just purchasing, behind the gate power, it's not clear what impact that's going to actually have. Knockdown effects, as you've said.
And the other thing that we wanted to do, and it kind of goes somewhat into like the radical transparency sort of, lens, but we wanted our LCA to reflect reality, right? Before any adjustments for, power purchase agreements or otherwise, is just look at it raw, right? Look at it using grid electricity. Don't try to, if you will, sort of adjust the numbers by, using, other kind of mechanisms, right? And so that's the other reason, is just, we wanted to be super transparent about actually what our efficiency is without any kind of adjustments.
Is there anything that we didn't cover that you will be despondent if we do not cover in the show?
Yeah, let's kind of think of it. I think the core themes from Graphyte's perspective, right, are, really, one is this kind of low cost, tech de-risk. Let's do what we can today as we move up the kind of supply curve, right? And I think that kind of, quote, delivery matters, right? Let's look at the, technologies that are delivering today, and let's invest some more in those, right? I think it's important to continue, to invest in, bringing down what you might consider more futuristic technologies, bringing them down the cost curve. But I don't think that should come at the expense of, kind of, again, I go back to my supply curve, but sort of, buying for the things that can remove carbon from the atmosphere today.
Yes. And I had one actually other question that relates to what you just said somewhat, but we didn't cover it fully yet, which is, I've had this thesis I've been chewing on for a while about biomass availability. And right now people oftentimes have to pay tipping fees to get rid of the stuff, depending on the facility, or people are glad for you to come and take it. But will there potentially be a future where this is no longer a waste, but a resource that people are competing for? And how does this impact the economics of graphite? That struck me as a longer term risk of the future of biomass sourcing wars, which may or may not happen. I don't know. What are your long-term predictions for biomass?
Yeah. So I'll take the first, kind of cut here, and then I'll ask Hannah to come in with the details. But I think if you think about biomass, right, like I think the things, to think about are, number one, well, why are we using the biomass in the first place? The residuals, right? What is it? What are we using it for? And generally speaking, that's for a climate benefit of some reason, right? If not, there's, many, that's why it's a, kind of a waste today, is that people haven't, sufficiently, factored in the use for climate related reasons. So if you're using biomass, you're likely using it for climate related reasons. And if you're using it for climate related reasons, there's two numbers to pay attention to. One is the efficiency, the conversion efficiency. If you've got 1 ton equivalents in biomass, what is the net effect of that ton not going into the atmosphere? Okay, so kind of a conversion efficiency. And two is cost, dollar per ton of CO2. If we look across all uses of biomass and we apply that framework, that lens, we will first of all utilize the resource in a very logical way to the greatest climate benefit with the least amount of dollars. Just by the way, carbon casting scores very well on that front, but I think it is kind of, irrespective of where we land on that, I think it is the logical way to think about that resource. Hannah, you've written a whole paper on this.
Yeah, I agree with everything Barclay just said. I think there are, in addition to sort of the fundamental efficiency and cost perspective, there's also many things that I think will make it easier. The hard thing about biomass is it's often distributed. So again, I kind of go back to like, you think about these different types of uses for biomass, the ones that are the most modular, the most able to site themselves near where the biomass is, are probably going to be the ones where they will win on cost because you're not having to transport it. So you think about, again, come back to like a BECCS plant, that may make sense at some point, but if you're running a BECCS plant on 1 million tons of biomass a year, you're inherently going to be transporting biomass a long way. And so I think you're going to see, even if you can, think about the economics of a BECCS plant and whether it'll be competitive with solar and battery at some point or now, I think you will probably see that there will always be places where there's distributed biomass that is not easily accessible for many of these applications. And so something like a BiCRS clay, where you can use small amounts of biomass, relatively small amounts of biomass, and relatively diverse feedstocks, because we're not doing a huge amount of transformation to that feedstock, that will take much, much longer, I'll say, to be a constrained resource. And so I think as far as like the long-term health of a clay like Graphyte, I think there's a long, long, long time before we're going to see much pressure on the biomass feedstock supply chain.
Yeah. And I'll also just, maybe kind of in conclusion on this point is, we can look at this from a very kind of like, technical and sort of economic assessment. We can also just open our eyes, right? And so I live in Memphis, Tennessee. I drive to our project in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. That's a major rice producing area. In the fall, I watch literally those fields going up in smoke, right? You see these giant clouds of particulate matter, of those fields being burnt, right? And if they're not burned, they sit there and they basically become, methane emitters over the course of the winter as the fields fill up with water and that biomass decomposes inevitably. That is the reality today. It's not just about rice fields. The timber industry is very similar in terms of how it deals with its biomass residuals. We kind of get hung up in this futuristic highest and best use of biomass, and we don't think about it literally going up in smoke today.
Barclay and Hannah, thank you for being on and for being transparent and for reading my homework, giving me notes on my homework. Thank you.
I'm going to email Jen Wilcox and tell her she did a good course. So
It's really good. It's a wonderful course. Highly recommend.
That's good. Thank you, Ross. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Ross. It's been fun.
Starting a business can seem like a daunting task, unless you have a partner like Shopify. They have the tools you need to start and grow your business. From designing a website to marketing to selling and beyond, Shopify can help with everything you need. There's a reason millions of companies like Mattel, Heinz, and Allbirds continue to trust and use them. With Shopify on your side, turn your big business idea into... Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/special offer.